One. And we are recording with Dr. Peter Breggin, who you were my last episode of last year. And for today's episode, this is episode 1063 on Sunday, January 22nd, 2023 at 4:08 p.m. Eastern Time to discuss your book, The Heart of Being Helpful, which you had mentioned during our last podcast. And so I got it and I read it. And it is, I mean, it really is beautiful. That's the only way I can describe it, is it's soft and it's loving and it's extremely vulnerable just from your position. It is there's sort of a meta theme to it. The entire thing is about being vulnerable and observing and analyzing yourself before you observe and analyze others. And then the very act in which you wrote the book, or the very manner in which you wrote the book, is itself an exhibition of vulnerability, which I thought was beautiful. But before we get into it, Dr. Breggin, please introduce yourself to all the new listeners.
Well, I'm Peter R. Breggin, MD, and right now I'm immersed in fighting for the freedom of America and hence the world, which seems like a far cry from writing with all my heart a book from a few years ago, The Heart of Being Helpful. It's very sweet that you like that book so much. It is my favorite book, I think, but it is not what I'm known for. I'm known for taking on giants by myself, building coalitions. And in that way, back in the early 70s, I stopped a massive return of psychiatric brain mutilation. I'm a psychiatrist, and I became the first psychiatrist to ever take on that issue, the first psychiatrist to ever testify in court against the worst lobotomist of all time, Walter Freeman, who used to do the famous ice pick lobotomies,
Mm-hmm.
where he would slip it around the eyeball of the person and tap it through the very, I guess it's shallow bone that's back there. It's a small, thin bone into the frontal lobes and swoosh around in the magic of being human. That's what it was. Because once he withdrew that pick, the person was no longer capable of the kinds of thinking and feeling we're doing today, and the kind of conversation basically destroyed the expression of the individual's humanity. And it's in a second. It's the minute that area is crushed. And that's the prefrontal cortex, it's called. And I never did get to testify against him because he died before that. But at least he knew somebody was holding him responsible at the end. And I've done the same thing with Electroshock, the first doctor to ever actually win as an expert, testify in a winning shock suit against Electroshock doctor. They're so slick and they come in with so much backup and professors that they can make up such terrible lies. I've had to become never thought I would be doing this when I was a freshman in college, let's say, but to become a real expert on brain damage and how to describe it and how to communicate to people about that damage. And so that has helped me a great deal there. In fact, just back in 2019, we actually had a summary judgment brought against the lawyer and the client who have been damaged by shock treatment, a case against a electroshock company and Somatics Inc. And they said there was not enough evidence for brain damage to even go to trial. And shock treatment actually causes instantly, the first time, a deep coma. First, it knocks you into unconsciousness, causes a deep coma. The person arises out of that coma, sometimes takes quite a while, could take 30 minutes, could take a few minutes, in a complete concussed state, not knowing where they are, who they are, what's happened to them. It's worse than something that would probably end the career of a football player and eventually even a boxer. And they may do that to you 30, 40, 50, 60 times, as many as they can get away with. Pays very, very well. The routine is usually 12 or 15. And instead of making the shock safer with time, as they claim they've made it all safer, I looked at the machines, and they actually set the machines now so that they have to give 8 to 10 times more than the older machines. That there's no option to do it like the safer older machines. You have to give 800 to 900 milliamps of electricity. With the old machines, you could give 80. So I mean, 80 versus 800. That's 10 right there in that particular comparison. And the judge agreed with my report. Said that there was plenty of reason. There was reason to go to court with this and let a jury decide who was right. And they immediately settled. I don't know for how much. The drug company settled, immediately informed the FDA that they had reports of shock treatment, which they had never sent in, of shock treatment causing severe memory loss and other cognitive problems, and then warned doctors that it was up to them to knowingly give informed consent to the patients. Like in a week, all that unfolded. But then now people who have been watching COVID will maybe understand just how bad these things are. Within a few days, the FDA, for the first time in history, then approved shock machines instantly to their defense, whereas they had been trying to get them approved for decades, but there were protests and demands for testing, but without any testing, just like we're seeing with the vaccines now, without any testing, the FDA went ahead and they approved the shock machines. As safe and effective when they're literally destroying the brain every time the electricity is passed through the brain. Insufficient strength to knock the patient instantly unconscious into a coma, arising with severe concussive symptoms. So I got hardened and maybe also developed a lot of understanding about how bad medicine can behave and how bad psychiatry can behave. And then when I started looking at COVID-19, and Ginger and I wrote what many people consider to be the basic Bible on understanding COVID-19, called COVID-19 and the Global Predators, We Are the Prey, 650 pages, but a well-made book, so it's readable, and a huge chronology at the end so you can follow things in order. So we were prepared. We weren't prepared for how ugly it was behind COVID. So it got just a new level of understanding, which I had a considerable amount of beforehand, and Ginger, sharing my life with me, had experience in when I'm a medical expert against the drug companies and involving the FDA and other government agencies. And then Ginger led another of our projects, discovered that they were doing eugenics involving Black children and young Black people. They were setting up and some Hispanics, they were setting up a massive interagency program in 1994 to investigate the biologic and genetic reasons why little Black children grew up to be so violent. Now that's eugenics. That's like you talk about Jews in Nazi Germany and Blacks in Nazi Germany. They exterminated African Americans as well. So we actually got that whole program canceled eventually, not without a lot of fighting. And eventually the government let go of the lead psychiatrist. He was the most powerful psychiatrist in the world at the time, Fred Goodwin. The government let him go because what he did was so egregious that it empowered some of the people inside to say, well, this man should go. But he was going to just skip all the psychosocial and economic and family issues that might distress inner city children, and the drug dealing and the flooding of drugs in those communities to help destroy them, not just by their taking them, but by their selling them. All the big issues ignored. No, it's the gene in some little Black child. They were going to even try to study the children in utero. So we've got a bit of background in all of this, and we got deeply into it. I do this kind of work. It feels like out of commandment rather than out of choice, if that makes any
Hmm.
sense to you. When I went into private practice, and after I was at the National Institute of Mental Health. It was the pinnacle of a young career. After I finished all my training, some of it at Harvard, I went to I became a lieutenant commander in U.S. Public Health Service and at the National Institutes of Mental Health. And I began to fully realize that there was no place for me in the new psychiatry. I wrote a book about that, one of my best books, Toxic Psychiatry, and how that just, it was all corrupt now. It was all under drug company who were taking human experiences of misery and suffering and sadness and anxiety and making it biologic. And in itself, that entails destroying a human being to convince them of that. This takes away their free will, their ability to work on their issues, their ability to be vulnerable to their feelings. Instead, they're taught to suppress their feelings with drugs. So there wasn't any place for me. And I was just going to do therapy and write books like The Heart of Being Helpful. That was my goal. And but when I heard lobotomy was coming back, that the thing I started with, I especially learned they were operating on little black children, Mississippi, Jackson, University of Mississippi in Jackson, Mississippi. I just felt commanded to somebody had to stop this. I couldn't sit back. I knew about lobotomy. I knew what it was like. No one had ever stood up against these guys, and now they're marshaling to come back with new technologies, stimulating the brain of children, putting holes in their brains with overheated electrodes, things like that. But underneath all of that work, and now COVID-19, Ginger and I are on the cutting edge of looking at what's been behind COVID-19 and what's much more is behind the whole globalist assault on the world. There's a globalist assault on that American flag behind you. It's put there so importantly. They want to destroy America's pride. They want to destroy patriotism. They want to destroy God. They want to destroy country so they can be globalists and run things. So there are no accidents in how horribly the government's behaving. It's not behaving horribly because Joe Biden is mentally compromised. It's he's behaving horribly because he's being led by quite intelligent people. Probably Obama's right in there, manipulating things behind the scene. Maybe Biden's wife. I mean, it's hard to get a handle on it. This is speculation. Hard to get a handle on who's pulling Joe's strings, but it ain't Joe. And these things like opening the border, destroying energy independence by cutting the pipeline and so on. These are all aims at destroying America, and so that the globalists can run free. And we're really documenting that more and more. We do a good job in the book, I think, but we're really into it more and more now. And so where does all this fit in with the heart of being helpful? One of the things that I came up with in my working with patients will maybe help a lot. When I started working with patients, I actually began in college. I was running a big Harvard volunteer program as a college student, and we showed we could get patients out of the hospital if we were given individual patients, much to the shock of the psychiatric profession, and became quite noteworthy. We were written up in those days, a lot of different good places. In those days, national magazines, the last big mental health study to come out of the government that was in favor of psychosocial interventions rather than drugs, shock, and lobotomy. And I thought there'd be a place in psychiatry for my continuing with this because I was doing it within psychiatry as a volunteer leader and got to know all the professors, not all, many professors at Harvard. They wrote recommendations for me into medical school before I even had completed the requirements, which I was cramming in. And I literally got accepted without even finishing until I did finish them, but without even finishing the basic requirements because of that volunteer work. And there was a place, but by the time I'm leaving the National Institute of Mental Health, I had learned enough to know that it was all controlled now by the drug companies. Mottos were taught to psychiatrists such as you can't talk to schizophrenia. I'd been talking to people labeled schizophrenic when I was 18 years old on the wards. And boy, they knew that I was there, and they loved my visiting and the other volunteers visiting, and it meant a lot to them. And we got a lot of these patients into much better places in the hospital. We really helped them. So I was torn from the beginning because what I was doing full time was being a therapist. And all of this, I had long hair, and I missed the 60s. I just missed the 60s. I finished my medical training, psychiatric training in 66, and then I finished at the National Institute of Mental Health in 68. And so I wore jeans and I had long hair, and I'd go on TV to talk about lobotomy, and they'd be more interested in how I was dressed and what did my patients think of my long hair. So I went out and bought, in those days, now think about it, this is 1972. I went out and I bought a $500 camel wool suit, camel hair suit. I know what that would cost now. You could
Gotta play
even
the
get
part.
and I got a haircut. And the next TV show I went on with was with an impeccably dressed Chinese show host in Los Angeles. They used to have very great local TV. We don't have that anymore. They'd have great shows out of LA and New York that were at least good by standards. And he comes up to me and he says, instead of commenting on my long hair or my jeans, he says, "Who's your tailor?" So I realized it really does make a difference.
Oh, yeah.
It felt fake, but it made a difference. So it
Gets
was,
the job done.
gets the job's done. It's a uniform. So
Yeah.
I began now. Of course, I'm going a little backward. I don't even have on with you a jacket, which I almost always wear. I decided that you would be more comfortable probably with me, and I'd be more comfortable if I didn't put
I
on
am.
my
Hey,
jacket.
I keep a fuzzy blanket and I wear slippers. I keep it very laid back in here.
But one of the things I discovered, this is very interesting, and it's something to really think about now that we're fighting for our rights and liberties in America. I decided during my training, and some of it had to do with a psychiatrist that I worked with, who was one of my professors named Thomas Zoss, S-Z-A-S-Z. Zoss had, he's gone now. He had no idea about love, no idea about compassion, but he knew freedom. Like a lot of the libertarians, he knew freedom in part because he was free of a deep attachment, I think. So, and I was feeling very libertarian at the time. Oh, I learned to be at the time. I'm much more conservative now, much more into attachment, to love. But um, I I started my practice, and I would tell my patients I don't do things that other psychiatrists do. So you can be at peace here. You can be free and be yourself. I never commit anybody, and I would say I probably could be held responsible for that if you did something harmful and I didn't commit you, but I won't do it. I don't believe I can help a person whose life is in my hands, whom I can control. So if you come in and tell me you're suicidal, I am not going to commit you. I'm not going to give you a drug either, because I don't think that we should handle our worst fears and anxieties by drugging them ourselves. So it's going to be just a conversation. The only exception to that is, and there's a law that I don't disagree with, which is if I feel you're about to really kill somebody, I'll let you know that we got to work it out by the end of the session, and you have to give me the gun,
Mhm.
which I've had in my
Yeah.
experience, literally in my therapy. You have to give me the gun, or I got to report you.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, there are risks there, I suppose, and I hadn't even thought about it. I talk about an experience like that, but I don't. I'm not completely you know, disclosing him or me, but
Sure.
it's the experience. And I never thought until this moment, talking to you, Tommy, that he could have just shot me and left.
Sure.
I wasn't even thinking that. I was just thinking, what am I going to do to help this man not ruin his life and my life indirectly by shooting somebody? Funny, I never thought he would shoot me until this moment. That was certainly an alternative, wasn't
Well, I guess there's
it?
almost like cutting your losses. Like the second this guy is in a room with you with a gun, I think your brain might almost subconsciously just take that and throw it out the window because if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. There's no point in stressing over it. So it's like once you're on the plane, like if the plane's going down, it's going down. So just don't even address that. Address the next thing in line.
Well, that's a wonderful analogy, and it fits with one of the themes of the heart of being helpful. And this show is about the heart of being helpful. And folks, it's I think a treat for me and maybe for you because I probably have not just talked about the heart of being helpful in years, but it is, I think, one of the most deeply fulfilling books you can read. And you'll learn about me, about Ginger, about relationships with animals that I've
Mm-hmm.
watched Ginger have that are so deep that you just can't believe it. And that's continued to happen. Um, I'll give you a little story about bonding with Ginger. We're going to be all over the place.
Yeah, who cares?
It's
Yeah,
going to be
do
the
it.
real Peter Breggin sort of
Yeah, no,
show. Yeah,
that's
there
what this
you go.
podcast. If this podcast ever stays in a square of agendas and talking points, something's gone terribly wrong. You just it's a bottle rocket with no guidance. Light it and just see where it goes.
All right, where it goes. We always had Shetland sheepdogs. Ginger had been raised with Shetland sheepdogs. Ginger had partly lived in the backyard gated area of the Shetland sheepdogs. And and now as we got a bit older, about 4 years ago, I'm 86 years old, folks. Ginger's 70, going to be 72 in February. Um, and then not long after, I'll be 87. Good God. And she decided she wanted a smaller dog. She was a little embarrassed about becoming an old lady with a little dog in her lap, but she was thinking that she really could understand that and she wanted a little dog. And she showed me some dogs that were available, and I looked at one, and it was a oh my God, the really cutest little dog of all, Yorkie. It's a
Yeah,
Yorkie.
my aunt has three Yorkies. My aunt and
Three
uncle,
Yorkies.
three little Yorkies. Yeah, they run. They orbit my uncle like moons. It's funny. They're constantly within like a 6 foot circumference of him.
Well, that's what my story's about.
Okay,
That's so
all
interesting.
right.
That is so interesting. So Ginger was going to go and look at another dog first. And I said, no, this Yorkie, look at this face. We got to go look at this Yorkie. So we go, and this poor Yorkie is living amid a woman who's getting divorced. No, not divorced. She's separated. No, not even separated. Her husband's moved out of town to work, and she's got all these dogs in her mother's house, and they consist of a very large. I don't remember. I think they were not like Airedales, but really big and potentially you'd think nasty dogs, and these little Yorkies, and and it's very chaotic, and it's hard to understand how that little kid would be getting much attention, and she hadn't been. As we got home, we realized she was a kind of a rescue, really an expensive rescue. And Ginger likes to drive, and she drove us home, and we had a 2 hour drive, and I'm holding the little Yorkie, and I'm very concerned about holding the little Yorkie all the way home because I'm afraid the little Yorkie will bond with me, and this has got to be Ginger's dog.
Mhm.
I had a Sheltie. They don't bond so hard with one person, but who definitely, thought of me as maybe the most important person.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
not, but possibly. But this little Yorkie is in my lap the whole way, and kind of looking at Ginger and kind of trying to relax. We get home, we get into the house, and we sit down in the living room, and I sit on the couch, and Ginger sits for some reason across from me in a chair, and we're there about 2 minutes, and I look up, and the Yorkie has begun to circle Ginger. So I say, Ginger, look what's going on, and I count and the Yorkie makes 20 circles around Ginger's chair. And I don't mean 5 feet away. I mean as close pretty much as
Yeah.
she could get to the chair. And looking up at me once every turn glances at me as if are you getting the message or
You
whatever?
watching this?
You watching this? And does it. And then Ginger picks her up. And it was stunning. I've seen other things with animals, and there's stories about them in the book, part of being helpful.
Mhm.
And it was either later that day, probably the next day, that Ginger then goes out to shop for a few minutes. The Yorkie comes over to me, sits down on the floor, on upright sitting, looking at me and begins to piteously wail. Bring her back, bring her back, bring her back, wailing till Ginger gets home. I actually recorded it on my phone. And I joke, but it's pretty close to true that's how I felt when I met Ginger. I mean, that I understand it perfectly.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
um, so the book is about, and I still haven't gotten to the connections to freedom. So the book is about the way I do therapy and still do it. Almost very little has changed in how I do therapy, other than I'm more verbal, more confident. It's more of a conversation, but I still work a lot with feelings. And I have more wisdom. It's so clear that I have more wisdom after all these years, and I can give people helpful tips within an hour easily, almost always, because I've just been doing this for so long. But I felt like I was a progressive at the time. And it was somewhere around in there, with John Kerry, who's so important in the current administration, and who was such an elitist. He just went to Davos, and he
Mhm.
talked about the special people. Who knew he'd ever be one of these special people who would be planning the future of the world? I mean, they just he got me to help me become this virulent progressive and anti-war and everything, because he came back from Vietnam and basically said that American soldiers are murdering people and they're bloodthirsty and they're rapists. And no, it turns out he never saw anything like that happen. Um, and so I felt very progressive at that time. But I noticed something about myself, which was that I wanted to be utterly responsible for myself. I'd made these decisions very young, and I wanted to be free of compulsion. And so that is the format of what I did as a therapist. It began with the sovereignty of the person who came to see me. And I also had concluded from my childhood that people really needed love, but it was very hard to find. And I put together this idea that what really is the core of healing is feeling loved and loving, and that what we need to thrive in that way is a real sense of personal sovereignty and as much freedom as possible to choose our way of life, to choose what we love to do, to choose what we believe religiously, to be free. I didn't know that other people had figured this out. My education at Harvard didn't get way much into the Constitution of the United States or anything even back then. You didn't get it very deeply. I had some inkling of it that I barely remember from one good solid history of America course I took. I was originally an American history and literature major. And it was just in me that I wanted to be free of all things. I never put up with bullying. I took big risks as a child. I was kind of well known. I was president of the class most years, and I was also an athlete. And I was a good student. I wasn't number one, but I was a good student. So there were people who wanted to pick on me and bully me, sometimes just during football practices. And I never, ever wanted to back down. I wanted to be free of bullying, and I protected friends and stuff like that. It was just in me. Now I think that it was just given to me. That's how I view it now. It's not genetics, it's given somehow by something beyond anything we understand that we call God. Just gave me this and said, build it, kid. And the when I was doing my practice, I did not know that I was building essentially a libertarian conservative kind of viewpoint
Mm.
that I shared with my clients. I'd never met a conservative in my whole life, not at Harvard. We actually knew in the entire freshman class there was a conservative. This thing's been going on of excluding conservatives forever, because we're talking about, I was at Harvard 54 to 58. It's a
Oh,
long
wow.
time ago. And when I began to do the work of taking on these psychosurgeons, now I had my suit and I did things I'd never dreamed of doing. I met congressmen and senators. You can't really do that much anymore, what I did then. And I talked to them about psychosurgery, and I found that the most people who were listening to me were conservatives, people that I grew up thinking I was supposed to hate, liberal Jewish background, not very political, but that was imbued in
Sure.
young Jewish kids. We thought that Hitler was a conservative. We didn't know what he was, a socialist.
No. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
He was a right winger.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
You,
but
sorry, go on.
but anyway, God, I'm snorting. I'm so relaxed. I don't think I've ever snorted on television
No,
before.
it is kind of funny. Yeah, you are born, I guess, born to hate him. Yeah, who else would be born to hate him more than, yeah, a young Jewish guy? It's just,
Yeah, during the Holocaust.
yeah, it's driving the right side of the road. Make your bed when you get up and hate Hitler. Just kind of some daily to dos.
Well, and connect him to conservatives, because
Well,
that's what the
sure.
liberals taught us.
Yeah,
These
yeah.
were right wingers. Hitler was the right winger. Stalin was a left winger. No, they're both collectivist abusers.
They're both demons who abhor free will and want to destroy anything in their way. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
left. No one's ever been in a gulag or a concentration camp and gone, well, at least he's not a right wing. Like, no, when you're starving to death and your family's
Oh
worked to
God.
death in front of you, you don't care if it's
Yeah.
Stalin or a Hitler.
Yeah.
It's sorry, but as you were.
Right. Or the niceties between the fight between Hitler and the communists or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, no. When you can see your own rib cage because you haven't eaten in a week, I don't think you're
Yeah.
too concerned about the ideology of your oppressor.
Um, so, here I am. I'm talking to a conservative senator. J. Glenn Bell Jr. was his name. And I've gotten in because his assistant thought what I was saying on the phone was important. Man's never met me. He's never heard of lobotomy. And his constituency is the National Institutes of Health, because it's Maryland. And
Mm-hmm.
Bethesda, Maryland is the heart of the health gulag, or
Yeah.
the health deep state. Health deep state. And so that's his constituents. And I explained to him what psychosurgery is. And he looks at me after 3 minutes and says, that's immoral. It's immoral to do that. I will do whatever I can to help you.
Hmm.
And he did. And I thought, this man's so reasonable to talk to, but he's a conservative. Then I met the head of the founder of the American Conservative Union, David Keene. And I expressed to him, because he's another person who just, when I started talking, he found me, and
Sure.
couldn't have found him. I would, American Conservative, are you kidding?
Yeah.
It's not a den of evil. And David and I were talking over lunch. He probably invited me to lunch. I didn't have a lot of money.
You're not inviting him to lunch. Yeah.
And he said, well, what do you believe? I said, well, I'm a liberal. He said, yeah, well, tell me what you believe. He said, I believe in individual freedom, personal responsibility. He said, you're not a liberal. You're a libertarian. I'm a conservative, but you're probably a libertarian. Let me introduce you to some.
Hmm.
And he introduced me to people, and I got connections all the way up to the assistant to the president from these people. And he introduced me to Bob Kephart, who was the owner, creator, and publisher of the big conservative newspaper in DC. It's probably just online now. I forget what the name of it. So long ago. Those people are not around very much anymore. I don't think they're around. Um, so I began to realize that there was a whole freedom philosophy and politic, and it wasn't liberalism somehow. It was more like liberalism then. Now liberalism is pretty much violent communism. I mean, it's just very, very close to that. And I began to just think more and more about the therapy and politics all being one thing,
Hmm.
understandable as a whole. And that I wrote about this back in the 70s, that in therapy, you create a mini utopia in which two people are protected from each other by ethics and protected from the world by privacy. And you get to talk about, in a freedom setting, about life and how to live your life. What are the traumas that affected you? What are the aspirations that you had? How do you want to live? What is love? Do people actually love each other? What's your experience with it? And then eventually I began to work with couples and just help them love each other without coercing. So the first thing you do is you stop them from coercing each other by pointing out what they're doing and ask them if they'd like to experiment, giving all that stuff up. And almost everybody who comes to me at least says, well, we never really quite realized it, but gee, yeah. Yeah. I mean, am I actually bullying you, Tim? Yeah, it makes me feel awful when you sneer at me about what I say. And am I bullying you? Are you kidding, honey? When you glare at me, my father used to hit me after glaring at me. And you have these amazing conversations, and
Yeah.
people let go of coercion and get what they want through loving one another. And what you get from loving each other is so far beyond what you get by bullying each other that it's another world.
Well, you can almost see the direct correlation then to the pursuit of freedom versus an authoritarian guiding hand.
Yeah,
You can
exactly.
you can enforce morality by gunpoint, or as you saw in your situation, you didn't have, and then literally at gunpoint, you just sat there and you said, "Well, you got to give that to me, right?" And you put it aside,
At the
and
end of the session, toward the end, I said,
yeah,
"Now give
and
me
then
the."
yeah, tell me, you gotta. I don't have one. You're making me, how would you feel if I pulled out a gun? You'd probably be uncomfortable too. But there is that. There's almost you could. That almost was the most beautiful manifestation of what you're discussing. Is it physically came out in the form of a revolver, of
Yeah.
hey, like we're not on an even playing field. I may be making you feel uncomfortable by pointing out the gun. Well, you're making me feel uncomfortable because I don't have a gun or a bulletproof vest. And coming at something from a form of autonomous, consciously chosen vulnerability will always outweigh something that is surrendered under the illusion of choice. Hey, if the police have me surrounded, yeah, I'm choosing to get down on my hands and knees. No, you're not. You have one choice, right? It's so there is something about that that I think it is kind of ironic that you saw in the realist form is that coming from that place of surrender and freedom is far more powerful than any amount of force. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh no, no, it's just it's very good to talk about with you. I just happened to come on that. I decided to look at the book before we talked, and
Sure.
the chapter I came upon
Was that
was the chapter where my client patient, I like to call them clients. I've had to train myself to call them patients when I testify in court. Otherwise, it just doesn't look right because I'm a medical doctor.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not a psychologist or somebody else. But it gave me chills rereading that and thinking about it, and thinking about all that got saved in that hour.
Mhm.
Um, it was, and the work he did. I mean, he did it within 1 hour. He did an enormous amount of work on why he had to murder somebody that, had slept with his wife, and he actually looked at himself and said, and she did that. She did that because I've done it. I've been unfaithful. And to just go on that whole long strain down to the rage we have at others has so much to do with ourselves. It's unbelievable. That's been so helpful to me as a reformer, because I could not do the kind of extreme reform work that we're doing now. It's in some ways more extreme than ever before. We're under a kind of personal attack, and which I don't want to talk about, but people can find it on the internet. But then much more personal than when we were, when our work was causing people to lose their practices of psychosurgery, and they're being ahead of the biggest mental health agency in the world, and things like that. And one of the things that I continually come back to is it's not about anger and hate. And the other person can be full of anger and hate, but it's not about that for us. And if you look at that part of yourself and you can just let it go. I began really letting it go. I was your typical angry young man, doing the reform work. And it was actually in a personal relationship that I was going out with a woman who was in AA. And so I went to a couple of AA meetings, and I was just feeling so much anger at one point, and walking by myself. And I remembered that in AA, you give up your alcoholism to God. You give up your addiction to God. And I thought to myself, I don't want this hate and anger. And anger is like an addiction. And I said, God, if you need somebody to be angry at you, would you handle it yourself? I can't do it and do the work that I'm supposed to do. And of course, it didn't change in a second, but it came pretty close to beginning to change in a second anyway. And I've tried to work on that principle throughout my life, that my being angry and even wanting to hurt the people whom I'm trying to stop.
Hmm.
And I talk about that in the book. I
Mhm.
realized I give an example um, of I had to sue somebody back in the 70s who was really libeling and slandering me, and I did so, and he settled for a large enough amount of money for me to buy a lake house back in the 70s. And while I was suing him, our attorney sent him on Christmas Day, just sticking it to him, an order freezing his assets until the end of the suit. And I got a copy because I was the person bringing the suit. He hadn't told me he was doing this, the attorney, and I thought I was being sued by somebody, and I couldn't, I'm just looking at this piece
Yeah,
of
yeah,
paper,
just first glance.
and my heart sank. And when I realized what it was, I said to myself, I'm just never going to take those kinds of actions against other people. That is not what I'm trying to do. And I hadn't approved of it, and I hadn't thought about it. And in my reform work, I've tried to separate myself from inflicting pain on the other person, but sticking as much as I can to what the person's done and why it needs to be stopped, what the agency's done, why it needs to be stopped, what the medical center has done, and so on, what the country's doing and why it has to be stopped. And if you can get there, and to the extent that I can get there, I think it's one reason why I can still do this work at what people would call an advanced age. um, I think that
Nonsense.
uh,
Nonsense. I've
what?
I've interviewed Charlie Duke. Charlie Duke is, I believe, pushing 89. He's one of 4 men alive that have walked on the moon. And he's still, I'll try to have him on and I'll email him and he'll be like, I can't talk this weekend. I'm windsurfing in Dubai. No, no, I would not consider you an advanced age because he's out there. He's still a globetrotter. Sorry, Tommy, I'm going to meet Bibi Netanyahu this weekend. And I'm like, of course you are. 5.5 decades older than me. Of course you are. So no, I will not allow you to make that assertion that you're not advanced aged.
Yeah, no, and I don't feel that way. But I feel more. I think I'm actually doing better therapy work than I ever did do. Um, and I mean, if it should be that way. You got to start
Sure.
young. You start young at things, but presumably you're going to get better and better if it's something like medicine or therapy, um, often art, things like that that aren't so much how fast is your machinery, but something about yourself spiritually.
Yes. It's
They
not.
say mathematicians peak at 25 or something,
Yeah.
but if you're going to do medicine, you peak. You just keep growing with your
Yeah.
knowledge and your wisdom, hopefully.
Yeah. It's not athletics where you slow down.
Yeah,
It's something that you can.
that's
I
good.
mean, this is episode 1064. I would like to think that I am more wise today than I was yesterday. And
Hmm.
as the hundreds of episodes kind of just pile up in the rearview mirror, it's what you said earlier. You definitely get more confident. I think if this was the 10th episode I'd ever done, I'd be holding up your book, I'd be freaking out, I'd be bringing up chapter names versus when you've done so many of them,
Hmm.
you really just kind of lean back and it's much more you're riding a river
Yeah,
and you don't even it's very Buddhist meditative when you don't you stop labeling things as good or bad. You don't go, oh, the conversation shouldn't go there. You don't say the conversation should go there. You just start to watch it unfold and wherever it goes. And so to you doing therapy, I would imagine you probably are getting closer and closer to if there's an absolute truth as a therapist. Not granted, I don't know. I'm not an MD. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know. But I would imagine if there is a pure elemental core, you're probably approaching it.
well, I don't know. I don't want to. I don't want to emphasize it so much that way because the person who has to feel power is the person you're helping. That's one of the most important principles. So, while I'm talking all about how I approach therapy, if the person you're working with doesn't feel a growing sense of their own power, then you've really lost it.
But that
So
might
I
be
just get a little shy about being too emphatic about getting to the special place in the universe. I think what I'm getting, if I would, I'm Jewish, but if I were getting to anything, I would say I'm getting to the most important principles in Christianity, which is you love God and love one another,
well, when I
and
say that when I say you're approaching an elemental core, I don't mean it in like you're
yeah,
approaching perfection, you're approaching
yeah,
Michael
nothing like
Jordan.
that,
No,
folks.
no, not that, but I mean that level you're approaching could very well be just total vulnerability in letting the patient
Yeah,
feel on an even keel with you.
yeah, and that's so important. And that's the same thing in marriage. Each person has to feel on an even keel with the other.
Mm.
And that the feminists were in part right in pointing out patriarchy puts men in a position. And then if you're on top of it, a physician, psychiatrist, and by the way, I don't think psychiatrists are good people to even go to. I'm going to tell people that it's medicine is not the best training for being a therapist.
Yeah,
The
you mentioned
best training would be being a therapist and having a lot of good supervision. I mean, that's what matters is learning to talk to people while you're young or much older, really. Probably better off if you're a woman who'd already successfully raised 5 children and just learning, to be there and understand and to try to be helpful and to be yourself, and which is different than most of the training, though, and to try to be there. Um, the so-called great therapists, I've seen films of them. I've seen them in action when I was younger. I'd go to their meetings and stuff. And they all looked much better at the end of the sessions than their patients did.
Mm.
they they got off on being great therapists. What? You look bedazzled.
No, no, I would say that then they're not the great therapists if they feel
Yeah.
better than the patients.
Well, I
That
think we want to be a good, caring human being who's helpful to other people,
sure.
and bring in all that experience and as best we can, and to know our own vulnerability. One of the things I continually try to do when I'm helping somebody, and you get people, you do this with your loved ones, with your friends. I mean, the only thing that's you really magically different about therapy is that it's an agreed upon situation in which there are grave limits on people having much to do with each other romantically, grave
Hmm.
limits and prohibitions,
Hmm.
and and uh, and you're there for a purpose, and the purpose is the other person, not you.
You
You're
can't
there to get paid,
they can't
maybe.
yeah, you point out in the book that you can't be using them to fulfill yourself, be it
Yeah,
sexually, be it spiritually, ethically, morally. You can't
yeah,
they can't be an extension of you're going, look how good of a person I am for helping this like no, you are not there to use them as a fulfillment of your own spiritual
exactly. Well
needs.
said. And this is how I think a good marriage is, a good loving relationship. If you're a man, you try to actually let go of any vestiges you have of patriarchy. You try never to look threatening or to be threatening, to be superior, to be an authority, to joke or tease about the other person in terms of a gender category, that kind of thing. And if you're a woman, you do your best to be strong and absolutely not cave in to the fear of patriarchy and those things, and to stand up for yourself, but not get even at the therapist's expense with men.
Sure. I th I'll make a note to email it to you. Again, Charlie Duke, the astronaut, he wrote a book that I only read maybe a month ago. No, no, 2 months ago, called Moonwalker, and it's by him and his wife, Dottie Duke.
Wow.
It's only about a 4-hour read.
Hmm.
Just what you're talking about right now and what was in the heart of being helpful. I think you would really it's granted he's not a doctor, it's, just being a it's being a guy growing up and, yeah, the '50s, the '60s, whatever dynamics existed then, and as they age in their marriage, uh, coming to the reaching that highest level of unconditional love, and it took them
Hmm.
decades. I think you would not obvious I don't care if you read it or not, it's up to you, I'm not trying to give you homework. I think you would really
Yeah.
I'll email it to you if you're
Thank
interested,
you.
and if not, don't. I mean, again, I don't
Don't worry about it.
yeah, um, to I was just thinking throughout the course of this, in the heart of being helpful, it is about you're coming to these situations and very much so analyzing yourself first. It's less about looking at them and it's about looking at yourself and where your own shortcomings, you have to watch out for these own pitfalls within your own consciousness to be a better caregiver. I'm I'm curious, and it's something that I don't I certainly don't know the answer to. How this then applies to what you've done in your life, right? Or taking down and facing off and speaking truth to these just these monoliths of bureaucracy and power and evil cunning, as you said earlier about the government doing X, Y, and Z. That this is not incompetence. Just opening the border, inflation, destroying energy, and it's not incompetence. That's not bureaucratic red tape. That is a malicious machine breaking apart the United States because it's the bulwark against global communism and a technocratic dictatorship.
And let me just say, that is my book, COVID-19, our book. I do the writing, so I sometimes fall
Hmm.
into calling it my book. It's Ginger does a lot of the most brilliant research and
Hmm.
thinking. And It's COVID-19, the global predators, we are the prey. That gives the whole basis for that one sentence you just said
Yeah, it's
about what they're doing to us and who is it. I go into who is it?
yeah,
Ginger and I go into it.
the transnational entities worth more money than God, and the United States is the thorn in their side. And
The
the
traditional United States.
the
Right
traditional
now,
the
right
traditional
now it's their
United
puppet. Right now it's
not
their
not now,
puppet.
not now. The traditional United States is the revolver, and they are the therapist, but they're not kind-hearted. They're saying, "Give me that revolver because I want to kill you." Whereas you said, "Give it to me. This is bad." We are the revolver, and they're saying, "Give it to me." They're the fox telling the hen, they're like, "Just let me out of the cage. I just want to help out. Just let me out of the cage." Um, how do you then approach these things? Electroshock therapy, the racist eugenics, lobotomy, and now you know, the big tuna, the biggest one of them all, the globalist takeover of the world. When approaching these fights, do you have to first analyze yourself? Does it carry over from therapy, or is this a scale independent thing? Water at different levels. A water in this water bottle versus water at the size of the ocean, it moves different. There's different fluid dynamics versus like other things. It's scale dependent where it looks the same at every, like a perfect fractal. Does this jump over to these fights, or does it only work in therapy where the mutual end goal is an increasing uh, presence of love and of caring versus these are consciously malicious entities that don't seem like they have any intention. It's not like the people at Davos aren't coming to you saying, I have all these evil desires to rule over people. Will you help me? They don't have any desire to change. Do you have to analyze yourself when fighting these things, or is it a different animal altogether?
Well, I think that's the most interesting question I've ever been asked.
It's
And I don't think I've ever even said that on the air.
it's a
That is a
big
real,
it's a
it's a
scary
really
question.
interesting
It's
question.
a scary question. I always tell myself, I'm like, I should love everyone. And then I'm always like, well, what about Anthony Fauci? And I'm like, I don't know if I can. Well, then do I really love everyone? It's dividing by zero. If you don't have the answer, that's fine. It's a,
Well, I have an answer to that one. I'm not
okay.
God, so I don't imagine that I love everyone.
Yeah.
Um, I understand that as a human being, my capacity to love grows weaker as the person is more far distant or more damaging.
Hmm.
So I think that um, I leave that issue up to God. Whether these people are going to hell, I don't really believe in hell. But I don't, I don't have a complex. You're hearing my religious views right now, and my view of God is, a loving creator, and
Hmm.
beyond that, I don't make much sense out of it. I just try to understand myself in relation to a loving creator.
Sure.
Um, but everything I do in therapy comes into all these decision making because I never want to, for example, take risks that aren't helpful and aren't going to produce a good effect, that are going to hurt me, Ginger, my loved ones.
Hmm.
So, and we're taking potentially fatal risks every day of our lives, Ginger and I, and we try to think about, we're honoring God, we're honoring love, we're honoring our principles. We are not trying to destroy certain people. Um, we don't ever think of it that way. We think of it, how do we let the world know that what's going on here is wrong, and what can we do that we think is ethical? And a lot of people who are fighting are not thinking that they're being as dirty as the other side.
Yeah.
And I'm not even going to say that I let God judge them.
Sure.
I mean, literally, because if that's, maybe it takes those people to take down those people. I
That
don't know the answer to that, but I know how I want to live.
that and then that itself is a philosophical quicksand. can you take down, I think it was the OSS and senior operations executive, the kind of the equivalent of Black Ops in the in World War II Britain. Churchill said to them, "This is ungentlemanly warfare," and I think his famous quote is, "Gentlemen, set Europe ablaze," because you can't. I think was Gandhi alive when Hitler was alive? Didn't he write letters to Hitler about only you can stop this madness?
That I don't know. That would be very interesting. He was alive, yes.
There's a comedian, Duncan Trussell, who talked about that. And he's this hippie through and
Yeah,
through. But he was like, I had a moment of realization that these flowery letters did not stop World War II. What stopped World War II was the white death of an atomic flash. And it's what you said about you might need
yeah,
these people to fight these people. Yeah, I mean, I've interviewed some Delta Force operators, tip of the spear guys. I'm
yeah,
very about love and meditation, but the reason why I know I'm able to exist in this place is because there are some pit bulls of human beings that you sick
yeah.
against these demons. So that's kind of a
See, the way it relates to therapy is you have to ask yourself, who do you want to be in the context of your understanding of the world?
correct.
Do you want to be the assassin who maybe would be required and maybe God would give him an order? I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, it's
It's way beyond me and my pay grade, but I know how I want to be.
yeah.
I know the people that I want to work with. We have a wonderful group of mostly Christian people. I don't know if I said already, I'm Jewish, Ginger's
Mhm.
Christian. Um, and that's where the therapy comes in talking with myself, with other people in the movement. And some people talk to me in the movement to get some help with some of these issues, the freedom movement, particularly the health freedom movement, and to be grounded in what we believe. And most of us would rather do what we believe and be taken out rather than try to specifically take out somebody else. It's just who we are. That's why we became physicians, hopefully, not to be euthanasianists,
Yeah.
killing
Mm.
our patients, but to be always thinking about, how do we make things better? What can we do to make things better and to take the risks? And uh, doing what we believe. The best epitome of that I ever met was Zev Zelenko, who
Mm.
became a dear friend, like a brother, before he died. And his death was natural, folks. He was not murdered, but Zev Zelenko, who was Jewish, and I introduced him as a prophet whenever I had him on my shows, and he never denied it. And he
I, w-
smiled.
I won't say it myself, but if you must.
and and he had no violence in him toward these people, and he had a deep understanding of the Holocaust and the slaughter and the relationship between the globalists and the Nazis. He had very clear notion that they were cut from all the same cloth,
Hmm.
just changed different technologies, different
Superior,
organizations.
superiority, inferiority,
Yeah,
cleansing culture.
yeah.
There's
So it does. The therapy stuff comes in all the time. It's been Ginger and I in our conversations all the time. We're trying not to react impulsively. We're trying to be thoughtful. We're trying to think about not causing collateral damage to any of the people in the movement that we love and care about. Um, we're very wary of that. Um, we make our criticism of people laserly focused. It's not happenstance.
yeah.
In fact, it's really, very, very carefully figure that out. So it is very, very similar. It's just not acting on your own impulses, which can be violent or they can be fear, they can be anxiety, but they bringing that loving gaze on the world and thinking, what do we want to do? And of course, we lose that, and then we help each other get it back. And that's what I teach couples to do. You're going to lose your what I'm fond of saying is, one of you can kind of revert to childhood again, to being helpless and overwhelmed, but the other can't. So you're putting a lot of pressure on the other when you revert, because if the other one reverts, you're both down the
Yeah.
tubes. Um, and you'll go crashing as a love relationship or a marriage. So the best thing is to always do what's so hard, which is to be more responsible than you think the other person's being.
It's what it's like what engineers say. They stupid proof things. They'll make an elevator and they'll say that the maximum capacity is 5,000 pounds, knowing that a bunch of drunk college kids are going to get on and it's going to be 8,000 pounds. And
Yeah,
secretly, it can actually hold 20,000 pounds.
yeah,
You kind of have to, it's the same thing with
yeah,
love. You have to almost mature proof things or immature proof things. Always
yeah.
try to be far more mature than you think is maybe even needed.
Well, that's very well said, and I think that's I could even maybe say that to some of my clients. I might cite you, Tommy, and say, "Yeah, you got to be far more mature than you think you want to be."
You don't have to cite me. If you cite me, they'll find out my name and then it'll lose all meaning. So you just use my initials like I'm some dead author. Be
The
like,
great TC, you mean, or something?
TC et al. Said in his early paper. Just kind of throw it under the rug.
Yeah.
To move back towards what you
Let's
said.
finish up in about
Sure,
5 minutes.
sure. Well,
Okay.
this is what I wanted. I didn't even realize I've kept you an hour or 10 minutes longer than I said. That's how I know it's a good one. Doesn't even need to be 5 minutes. It's more so this final thought, and I think it's important of what you said is you can't look at it as you're taking down someone. And although we both agree that might even be necessary, that might be how evil is fought is with your own evil.
Well, and in another circumstance, that's what I might do. I mean,
Sure, as
if
you said,
they're taking me to a camp and I have a gun,
you might have to be what in someone else's eyes is a radical, and it's like, well, now it's self-preservation. But
yeah. But go ahead. Or
before we
doing go
before we
ahead.
reach that point, is you said that you have to look at it as you're helping someone else and not hurt. So it's not that we are out to hurt a Fauci, a Klaus Schwab, a Bill Gates, a whoever you want. Name your demon.
Yeah.
It's rather that, much like in the book, you often bring up the seatbelt in the airplane metaphor, right? Help yourself before you can, or not seatbelt. Sorry, air oxygen mask.
Yeah.
Help yourself before you help others, so that you may help others. Right? All it takes is one person with a mask on to
Yeah.
wake up someone else, and then it's a rippling effect. In that, very loosely, if I could tag them together, it would be that you're not out against the globalists, but rather you are for the freedom of the masses. I'm not out to squash you, but I am out to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
And it may appear that I am fighting these people, but it's not putting them down. It's not a hatred of them, it's a love for these. And that's a delicate line to walk. But I think that is maybe the closest we could get to. Does therapy transfer over to when you are going up against
Yeah. Well,
these?
does your Christian beliefs transfer over, or your Jewish beliefs? It's all very similar to me. I thought of something very important I rarely talk about in public, which was probably the experience that made me the reformer. I was raised, this I have mentioned occasionally in recent years. I was basically raised by a black child, 16-year-old girl, brought from a farm in the deep South. I was a second child. And my mother just couldn't handle it, I guess. So she brought the second boy, and she brought this girl up basically to raise me. I don't know that that's what she thought in her own head, but that's what happened. And she was with us for 4 years, and I was so deeply melded with her rather than my mother. That was the way I came to remember her. Was my mother was a dream of my mother standing over my crib, and I was probably 4 because there wasn't a lot of room, and where I was living with in a small room with this young woman growing up, and both of us growing up, and she said that I loved, and she used the N word. You love that more than you love your
Mm.
own mother, and that's when I remembered her.
Wow.
Because I was trying to think, who is my mother talking about?
Who in God's name would say that?
And who was it? And what, and it didn't surprise me that my mother would say something like that.
Sure.
What surprised me is I had no idea what she was talking about. Well, I figured it out eventually. It came to me through meditating on it, thinking
Mhm.
on it, um, and I met her eventually, confirmed the whole story. And so I always had a tremendous. I've lost you.
No, no, that's the camera cut out. I don't know what's going on with that. Keep talking. I can hear you.
Okay, we can finish up. This will be good. You're in the dark with us, folks.
Here we go.
We're
Or
finishing
we
up
switch to
with a,
this camera. Oh, it's still not working.
no. There it is. All right, we're back.
Use the backup.
Different.
I've never seen that on that camera. It said overheating.
Oh
That's
my
the
God.
first.
Well, it's listening. It must be
It's
listening.
listening. It's getting hot under the collar. These are very intense emotional conversations.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
camera's getting a little
Well,
worked
then
up.
I'm going to end with a very intense emotional thing here. So when I started to, being a psychotherapist, I'm reading psychotherapy books and stuff like that. I've written couple of papers very young. I've been writing papers since my training, and I'm writing a paper about non-authoritarian treatment, how to do it, stuff like that, published. And I learn and I read in the newspaper that they're doing these lobotomies. So and I'm at a very prestigious place at the time. I'm doing my therapy at the Washington Psychiatric Institute, and with very older men around me. And I asked to get all the papers from these guys at the conference that they're doing lobotomy papers. I'm a young person, really young doctor, really interested in all this stuff. That was true. And I get all the papers and I track down, and there's one set of papers out of the University of Mississippi in Jackson where the children are as young as age 4 or 5 years old. It's putting multiple electrodes in their heads, letting them sit there. Later, I would get the descriptions. The kids walk around the wards permanently with these braids of wires coming out of the back of their heads. And he not only is stimulating their brains to see what happens, he's then burning out areas of their brains to see what happens. And he's this big surgeon at the University of Jackson. He's director of the Department of Neurosurgery. O.J. Simpson, maybe a similar O.J. Andy. I've not made that slip before. And I contact I find an African American attorney who's involved in civil rights down there, and I call him and ask him if he could go in the institution and see what kind of race these kids are, because you never leave this out of medical reports. There's no mention of their race. He says, I can tell you now they're all black. This is a segregated institution. And he would later go and meet some of the nurses and give me some information. And I remember around that time having a nightmare that I was a little black child. Entirely normal for me to think of that from my background. I'm a little black child.
Sure.
And they're burning holes in my head, and I can smell it. And I woke up, and where it fits so poignantly is I wasn't thinking I hate O.J. Andy. I was thinking I'm a little black child. I got to save the little black children.
Mm.
And I've never had that clarity before today. This has been like a little bit of a therapy session for me. I've never had that clarity on that's a dramatic difference.
It's a very big difference. It's not against him, it's for them.
It's for them. And you helped me make that distinction. And the stunning, interesting thing was that I called the department director of psychiatry. I said, you don't know me. I'm a psychiatrist. Did you know the Washington School of Psychiatry? He said, yeah, I've talked a little bit. I said, do you know that O.J. Andy? Do you know him? Yes, yeah. I said, he's operating on little black children from a local segregated institution. He's putting electrodes in his head, burning holes in his head, their heads, and so on. He said, oh my God. This is the only time this happened in my whole career with a colleague. They're so self-protective. He said, oh my God, I had no idea he was doing that. He said, I'm going to do something.
Oh
And he
wow.
never talked to me about it again. And what he did was he set up a committee to evaluate all psychosurgery, and Andy never operated again. He did it, and I'm thinking it was probably because I didn't call him and say I hate OJ Andy.
Yeah, it's
You
what
were
a
thinking that, yeah,
what an amazing thing. The self-preserving careerist, as we all are, right? It's how does this help me? And if it's gonna hurt me, I'm certainly not gonna do it. You come from a place of love, and what an odd thing is voluntarily, without not even solicited, he does something.
yeah. He's a
It's
good man. Because he had to know that was a high risk thing to impose himself like that on a colleague.
sure, but what
No one else has ever done it that I know of. I can think of a couple of somewhat similar, but not so personal as that. Not so. Okay, I hear you.
what a
It's
fa
kind of like Jay Glenn a senator. He went, that's immoral. I'll do. What can I do to help you?
what
Well,
a
sir, you could help me set up a psychosurgery commission. He said, okay.
what a fascinating manifestation though of letting go and coming from a place of not hating OJ but loving these victims. How it immediately, I mean, like lightning, he goes and does something. You probably never would have got that through if you picked up and said, "I hate this mother beep," and I'm gonna
Yeah, yeah.
beep, and
You
now
got to
I'm
get.
recording this phone call. And if you don't do something, you're gonna go on trial. What a wild thing to just come from a place of peace, and it
And I
works.
was very young at that point. So I had it under pretty good control. Not
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah. But
Not
that's, I think that was a beautiful story. I think that's
perfect.
what
Well,
a
you helped me understand that story.
well your
Bless
book
you.
well your book is the reason why we're having this conversation. So bless you. It's coming full circle. We're having this because of your book. So it's all it's a form. It's we're playing tennis. We're playing tennis with emotions and love. It's just
There
going
you
back and
go.
forth.
There you go.
Well, I think that was a perfect way to a perfect note to end this episode on.
Well, I'll say goodbye to your audience. I'm sure they're really, to be your audience, they're probably really amazing people. Let me know what kind of response you get.
Absolutely. Well, I will send you the link when it's up. Well, it is up live, but then well, I'll send you the link anyway.
Yeah,
And
this has all been live.
yeah,
Live,
yeah,
folks. Live.
yeah. It's live. Yeah, we're not making this, as you can
No
tell.
editing gonna happen.
No, and
It's
as you
already
can
out
tell,
of the
the camera's
bag.
shut down. I've never had that. That camera's more expensive than this computer. I've never seen it say overheating. That makes no sense. But as you can tell, it's live. We wouldn't change to this angle. Um, but Dr. Breggin, I will send you this link, and I would
And
absolutely
that book title.
yes.
Okay, I'll see
Oh
you
yes,
again.
yes. Charlie and Dottie Duke's book, Moonwalker. I'll send that to you. And yes, I would love to talk to you again. We will get that scheduled.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. God bless everybody.